Alright guys, what I'm going to try to do is do a crash course on the ProFX22v3 just for church so that you can at least get a crash course survival guide. So as you can see here, you have 22 different channels, of which of these channels they have lots of dials and knobs, but really they're just all the same, just repeated 22 times in a row. So first off, you have all your inputs, which are your XLRs. Should not have disconnected that. That was the mic input. But regardless, you have these XLR inputs. There's these 3 holes for higher audio quality. You can ignore probably most of the rest of here. This one here is your gain knob. How that is important is that gain is basically kind of like the volume control, and this is kind of like the gross volume control. It makes big swings when you make a small adjustment. So if you're not hearing enough from a microphone, one of the first things you can do is play with this. This next part is the compressor. The higher that you'd have that turned up, prevent your volume from clipping, which we'll talk about a little bit later. These next parts are the EQs. These will affect for how much you're tuning in or away for something. So right here, at least from this high EQ, so if I turn this, you may hear that the higher parts of my voice may sound a little more crisp and tinny, but if I turn it down here, it sounds really muddied and muffled. So generally speaking, all these are in the middle is kind of where you ideally want to keep them, but I think it's nice to add a little bit of crispness to a voice. So if I turn this up a little bit there, that will help. The mid-tones is the majority of where your voice will be. So if you turn it to the left here, it sounds muddy, but if you turn it to the right, it probably sounds a little bit better. So just maybe move to the right there. This is the frequency sweeper that can help you select which mid-tone frequency you want to apply the gain to. And this is more for the bass part. So if you turn it to the left, if it gets a little bit more bassy, assuming that's what it will sound like in here. But if you turn it all the way to the right over here, then you will probably sound way more bassy than before. But to turn it down a little bit so I don't sound too deep. The next part, those are sending to your auxiliary buses, and buses meaning that those are just secondary channels. You can send either to the in-ear monitors or whatnot for the musicians and everything, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. Next is the sound effect. This is all the way to the left means that you're turning it off, and all the way to the right means that you are having some of the sound effects in. The next part is the pan left and right. So if you turn this to the left, you'll hear only in the left audio channel. If you turn it to the right, then you'll only hear in the right audio channel. Generally speaking, you're going to want to just keep it in the middle. Next part is the mute. So if I press this, you're not going to hear me. So that was me trying to say something, but you couldn't hear anything. So if you don't hear anything from the headphones, one of the first things to check is make sure that you do not have a red light. And if it is, you just turn it off there, assuming that then you made sure the gain is there. The next part is this slider here. This will control the volume that is going to the master or main mix. So if you turn it down there, so I'm trying to talk really loud right now, but I'm just keeping my same volume. But as you can see, as I turn it down, you're not hearing me as well. So then if I turn it back up to normal, that's the main thing there. The other thing too that can trip you up, what the outputs are exactly. So you have buses 1, 2, and buses 3, 4. So this one right here, left, right, that means the main speaker channel. So you're going to want to make sure that that's depressed so that it goes out to the main mix and main speakers. This other one can be confusing, this PFL solo. Basically, if you have multiple channels of audio coming through and you only just want to isolate that one part of it in your headphone monitors, you would then press the PFL solo, and then you can try to figure out from there, how to tweak it, either the EQ, the gain, or whatnot. So if you press like another channel in channel 3, what can end up happening is that you won't hear audio from your main mix in your headphone monitors that you want to make sure is not depressed. Unfortunately, there's no light up button on the ProFX that would tell you that that's the culprit cause. So, but otherwise, across the other 22 channels, everything else is kept about the same. So this is the other important thing you're going to want to pay attention to, the main meters, which is being covered by a little bit of wires. Basically, as you're talking, you can see the main levels coming through here. So as you're seeing here, you generally want it in this kind of green / yellowish part there, around 0 dBs. You don't want it going into the red or the clipping area, because then the audio is going to distort, and that's not going to be good. So that's a good way for visually that you can monitor things without necessarily having to crank up your headphones to try to detect that. Now, above that, you have the headphone jack, which is going into the mics, which I'm monitoring my audio right now. The other part too, for the line in for a 3.5 millimeter audio jack, the standard one, you can plug that in from the computer or your phone. And then otherwise, the same things like the gain and everything else are basically exactly the same. The next part that's going to be important is down over here. You have your headphones. This can then control volume going to your headphones and not to the main mix.
mix.
We're not going to worry too much about these other ones right here, but this is the most important one. This is the main volume control for everything. So it doesn't matter what the levels on everything else may be here, whether this is up or down or everything, but this is the master volume control of the main speakers, and that's what you're going to go through. So I think the most common instance is that if you're not hearing any audio, you may be wondering what exactly is going on. So first, you're certainly going to want to make sure that your gain knob, that it's up and on. You're going to want to make sure that your sliders are at a reasonable level, more towards the 0 dBs, and then making sure that there's nothing here that is not muted, that the solo PFL is not depressed and causing a problem blare, and then also making sure that the main master volume is okay. And if you see the audio levels detecting that there is input through the system, but you don't hear anything through the monitors, then what you might want to do is turn up the volumes on the headphones. So yeah, so I think that's basically a real crash course on the ProFX22, so hopefully that helps.